As chair of the Exeter Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street on February 19, 2021. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone, and we remind the public that the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. All votes tonight will be taken via roll call vote, and I'll start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member of the board states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. Good evening, Selectman Darrell Brown.
Good evening. I am alone downtown.
Thank you. Selectwoman Lovey Roundtree-Olaf, good evening.
Good evening. I'm alone uptown in my house.
Thank you. And we have our clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman.
Good evening. I'm alone in my room in my house, and my husband is wandering around, as is my cat.
Thank you. The Vice Chair, Selectwoman Molly Cowan, good evening.
Hey everybody, I am here by myself in the room.
Terrific. And I am Nico Papakostendis, and I am also here alone in the room. With us, we have our recording secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening, Joanna.
Oh, I'm alone in the room.
And we also have Melissa Roy with us this evening, who has been appointed by the Select Board as the interim town manager. As the town manager is out on voluntary leave, Melissa will be filling in as the interim until he returns. So welcome, Melissa. Good evening.
Thank you. I'm alone in my room.
Okay. We do not have any board interviews this evening, so we'll jump right into public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public to weigh in with any comment. If your comment does pertain to something on the agenda, though, the board requests that you wait till that agenda item comes up. I will pause briefly to see if any hands go up. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. We do not have any proclamations or recognitions this evening. So at this point, I would ask for a motion to approve the Select Board meeting minutes of February 8th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. This evening, we have one appointment you'll see in our packet. This is for a deputy health officer, term to run concurrently with that of our health officer, James Murray. The deputy, if nominated, would run, the term would run 3 years concurrently with Mr. Murray's. James, did you want to comment on this quick before the board discusses?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is for Deputy Chief Jason Fritz. He's the Deputy Chief of the Fire Department, who will also be serving as the Deputy Health Officer of the town. This nomination form is the same nomination form that was given to you for my renewal earlier this year. I'm sorry, last year.
Great. Any questions or comment from the board?
I would just like to say there is a piece of legislation that offers for a health officer to live outside of town, which used to be, it has to be in town. We haven't voted on it yet, so it's still there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I would look for a motion to appoint Jason Fritz as the Deputy Health Officer for a term to run concurrently of that of the Health Officer.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. And congratulations, Jason. And we'll jump right into our discussion items, the first of which will be the COVID update. And Principal Rawson, I promised you we wouldn't keep you waiting very long, so I'll turn it over to you. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to come and share a little bit what we're doing and answer any questions. To get right into it, our students did return on February 11 through 13, as I think I reported they would. We have about 25% of the students choosing to stay home for the balance of the winter term. We're on terms. We have 3 terms, a fall term, a winter term, and a spring term. And what we did was we moved the spring break to the first 2 weeks of February. So students were learning remotely in December and January, and then had a 2-week break, and then could return for the end of winter term. And then there'll be a few days where they'll be on campus, but not leaving for spring break and then spring term. So the students that have come back will be here for 16 weeks, basically uninterrupted on campus. The 250 approximately students who chose what we call it's family choice, the option to learn remotely for the rest of the winter term, will come in March. And then we'll have all but about 50 students on campus for the balance of the year.
It's lost 10%. Fiverr.
Some of the students who are not able to get here, it's a variety of reasons, from not being able to get a visa to leave a home country, to maybe a vulnerable person at home not wanting to leave and then come back, or in some cases, perhaps being able to enjoy athletic opportunities that we're not able to offer in our campus setting. We did what I've described before, which is have all the students test before traveling. And I think there were 13 students who were found to be positive before traveling. So they stayed home to get well before coming. And then we tested everybody on day of arrival with a rapid PCR test. We brought in a firm to actually do the testing in our field house as the students arrived before they went into the dormitory. There were 4 students positive on day of arrival, but they didn't have close contacts, or maybe 1 or 2. So it was working just the way it was supposed to work. A couple of them went into isolation, a couple went home. And I'll explain the current number of cases in a moment as I refer to our dashboard. And since then, we're doing twice weekly testing, pooled saliva testing for all students, boarding and day students, and all adults who are coming onto campus. So and the pooled saliva testing means we get more data at considerably less cost. Our COVID dashboard that I've described before is publicly available. It is up and running. We are updating it now every day. So you're welcome to take a look at it every day. And I'm not going to go to the dashboard. Oops, I thought I was going to go to a document. Yes. So I'm just looking at an email that gives me the information. But current COVID cases, we have 6 active cases on campus. We have 3 active cases off campus, so a day student or a boarding student who could return home. And we have 23 students quarantining, 8 students at home, and 15 are in our quarantine unit off of Water Street. So anytime you want, just Google Exeter COVID dashboard, and our dashboard will come right up, and you'll see the number of active cases, students and adults. You'll see the history of testing in recent weeks. You'll see the number of students in quarantine, the number of students quarantining on campus or at home. We encourage students to go home. We have quite a bit of capacity, about 40 beds in the quarantine unit, and so we're well below that right now, and we expect, we're part of the environment. We expect some cases. We are trying to manage very carefully to have very few close contacts. We don't have a lot of close contacts. We can manage, we think, pretty well. We are not yet, we're still in our quarantine period. We modified it a little bit yesterday after a week to 10 days, depending on the day that students arrived. But we're not doing in-person classes yet, except a couple of exceptions. So we're sort of opening up, but we're not fully opened up in terms of in-person instruction and athletics and things of that sort. And we will be more cautious during the balance of winter term. We will not be doing any interscholastic athletics. We're hoping to do that in the spring term. For the balance of winter term, what we hope is game-like condition, but intramural competition. A couple of topics of interest are trails. We have a wonderful trail system, which we really enjoy sharing with the local community. And we opened it up while the students are away. We've closed the trails again with the students' return. we have had a number of very thoughtful letters from neighbors asking if we could open them up, keep them open, or keep them open in part. And we will watch for that. But we wanted to get through the quarantine period. And we may end up opening some of the more remote trails. But right now, the students don't have many options. They're using the trails quite a bit. And we just felt it was the safest approach, at least for the next few weeks, to close the trails to the public. But we do enjoy sharing those trails very much with the community, and so we will continue to look at that. Another thing to mention quickly, we will continue to not allow our students to go into town, and we will continue to try to undertake efforts to bring the town onto the campus. So we're doing a lot of special food orders from the local restaurants, bringing those on campus, things of that sort. But it's interesting, at one point, we were going to bring the students back at the end of the third week of January. And at that time, I have a cheat sheet here, but at that time, there were over 6,000 cases. Let's see, January 10, 6,400 cases statewide, now a little under 3,000. But between January 21 was 6,204. February 11, when the students actually arrived, was about half that. So the extra 3 weeks has really helped in terms of the cases coming down statewide and in the county and in the town. And we have fewer cases now than when the students left in November, but many more cases than when the students first arrived in September. So we are telling the students things are getting better, but we're still in a pandemic. Let's be very careful. So we're not having to go into town, but we're trying to support the town and frankly support our students by bringing the town to them. That means a lot to them too. And the last thing I'll just say quickly is that we're maintaining what we call a closed campus. And not a perfect bubble. We have day students coming and going. We have adults coming and going. But I mean, what I mean that is no visitors to our admissions office from the outside. Parents are not allowed on campus right now. They're not allowed into the dormitories. We're not having visitors come give assembly. Our assemblies are all virtual. So in all of those ways, we continue to maintain a semi-closed campus. The first large event that might bring a large number of people to campus would be graduation. And we'll be watching very carefully because my guess is that most high schools in the state will want to have an in-person graduation. And we're trying to begin to imagine that ourselves. But that's not until June 6th, so it's a little ways away. And we'll have to figure out how to do that. Will we have a limited number of tickets for family? Easier to imagine outdoors and indoors, obviously. What will be the state guidelines at the time? If families are coming that morning, and then leaving that evening, we don't have to worry, I don't think, about overnight stays and quarantine and so on. But that's the first significant thing that we're trying to imagine that would bring a lot of people onto our campus. But we're in the early stages of planning that. So I think I hope that gives some helpful information. I'd be very happy to answer questions. And of course, we want to be good citizens, good contributors to the town. So I'm always happy to hear questions and hear any thoughts or comments from all of you about how we can be a better part of the town of Exeter.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question. Selectman Brown.
Yep, just pooled saliva. Could you explain what that entails?
Yeah. So I have a prop here, because I have to do this tomorrow, but twice a week, I have to spit into this little tube. Can you see this? And we collect these, and they're shipped overnight to a lab. And there we go. Lovey's got it. It's part of the program. And so they're in batches of 24, Selectman Brown. And if it's negative, they're done. If it's positive, then they take the 24 vials and they take a little more spit out of each one. And they test them in pairs and see which pair had the positive. And then they test those two again to see who's positive. And so it's a much more efficient, more cost-effective way. The only disadvantage is we have to ship this, and it takes a couple days to get the results. It's not like on the day of arrival, the rapid PCR testing, we would get a result in a half hour for an individual. Okay, we had 4 positive out of a roughly 800. So, okay, you're positive, right to the health center. This takes a little longer. But of course, the kids are in masks, 6 feet apart. We're maintaining all those COVID protocols we've talked about many times. So the kids are supposed to be thinking, as I walk around thinking, I could be the one who's positive. I got to keep my mask on. I have to keep my distance. Everyone has to think that way. But that's what it is. And it wasn't available in the beginning of the year. So this is there's been quite an evolution of testing capability. And so we're getting more data for less cost now than we could in the fall.
Thank you.
Okay.
Principal Rustin, we sincerely appreciate the opening up and sharing of the trails. And I know that, as you said, when you were last on, while the kids were on break, you were going to open that up. And I know a lot of folks took advantage of that. And I appreciate the fact that you're going to consider maybe opening up some of the more remote trails. How can folks in town best monitor the availability of the trails?
So that's a great question. We have signage, and of course, the minute we open them up, we'll change that signage. But I could make sure that I could ask our Director of Facilities Management, Mark Layton, or Paul Gravel, Head of Campus Security, to also reach out to the town to make you and others aware of any change. So I could certainly do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Principal Rawson? Great. Well, I know you need to get back to dorm duty. Thank you for coming on, and we have an open line of communication. We'd love to have you back.
Well, we're very grateful, and thank you for all of your support, and thank you for getting me to dorm duty on time.
All right. Thanks. Good night, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Chief Wilking, there you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, board and Melissa. I'm just going to kind of dovetail right into where Principal Ross left off. We too are encouraged by the trending in the state of New Hampshire, Rock County, and of course Exeter. New Hampshire had 2,780 positive tests this past week, and this is the first number below 3,000 since the holidays. But we are absolutely moving in the right direction. Or most people feel we're moving in the right direction. With a daily rolling average of 350 I heard tonight on the news 343, but I calculated 350, but who's going to argue over a few? Again, these numbers we didn't see after the holidays. These are post-Thanksgiving numbers that we're kind of returning to. We all hope that we've kind of reached the peak, the pinnacle, and we're on the positive side. I won't call it a downhill side, but we're on the positive side of awareness and mask wearing and people trending without getting positive. I think I think sounds anecdotal. I believe that the continued vaccination process will continue to trend better and better numbers as we move forward. Unfortunately, there were 34 individuals in New Hampshire that passed, and a pretty high number this past week in Rockingham County. We had 14 residents of Rock County pass, which is one of the larger numbers we've seen, but the state numbers continue to trend lower. Again, Exeter in itself is doing very well. We've seen numbers weekly of 50 to 60. In this past week, we had 33 residents test positive. We're now at 651. And I'll repeat myself, as long as you're willing to have me here, we are still by far the town with the fewest positive cases of the top 20 population in the state of New Hampshire. So just to give you an idea, Hampton is well over 1,000. Durham is maybe up to 1,500, but it doesn't, the campus is kind of skewing those numbers. To have Exeter at 650, it speaks volumes of our efforts and the tax and the residents. And we only have 25 cases we're still monitoring in town. That number too has been 50 to 60, so it's huge. Other things that Principal Rawson spoke of, we too are doing the PCR rapid test at the fire department still weekly. Each employee is tested on the first day they return to work after their 5-day cycle of days off. And since the holidays, Christmas and New Year's, we have yet to receive a positive test. So they take that as a good sign. And we'll continue to do that and follow that FROST program provided by the state until the end of March, with most first responders being vaccinated, and all but 3 fire EMS personnel are beyond the 14 days after the second vaccination. So we've received what they believe to be the most benefit with antibodies on board. the state is winding down that process of providing the rapid test kits. But we will continue that cycle through the end of February and into March until the test kits are no longer available. But we're encouraged that none of our people have tested positive and going on 6 weeks now. So it's all good signs of things to come. I reported in the report that I sent to Melissa that we at the Public Safety Dispatch and James have received numerous calls from both members of residents of Exeter and around Exeter looking for help and information with the vaccination process. And although we would love to be able to help every person that calls, the long and the short of it is we don't have any better connections than they do. We can't call 211 on their behalf. We're not able to schedule the vaccinations. And I fully understand, and I've spoken to enough people to know it can be a frustrating process. You need a boatload of patience to hang on the phone, and sometimes after being on hold at the call center for over an hour, the information you receive isn't always helpful. I get it. And James and I and all those involved in the Public Safety Center will do everything we can to help. I just want to reinforce to those listening, there's no magic phone call and there's not a whole lot we can do except reach out to my partners at the state level and continue to reiterate that more needs to be done and there needs to be a little more understanding and empathy, I think, with those on the phone, with those calling in. It's sometimes it's difficult, but we all hope that'll continue. So, like I said, it's not uncommon to receive 20 phone calls a day coming from dispatch. They'd either get forwarded to myself or to James, and we do take the time to try to do what we can. But often the resident is left disappointed with us as well. But and that's certainly not our intent, but it is what's happening. The Exeter High School remains the regional vaccination site. I do not have any information regarding the move. There were rumors circulating that the state may be looking for an alternate site. There is nobody here from the SAU to speak to whether or not the agreement between the SAU and the high school and the state of New Hampshire will be renewed after March 1st. But there have been talks and there have been groups searching for alternate sites, to which I am not privy to. I have not been told of an alternate site. So speaking with James Miller, this is Monday, Sunday, he begged me to just continue. The high school is the site. They are still working 7 days a week currently. They may drop to 6 days a week in the future. But it is where we are directing people to go for the fixed vaccinations. We're excited at the fire department to partner with our local public health in the Seacoast region. We will be conducting clinics in Exeter and the surrounding towns in the coming weeks. Chief Pizon is leading that for me. He'll be working with our paramedics and EMTs to act as vaccinators and observers. Our first facility that we're going to be moving to is, we call it 277 Water Street, but the Exeter Housing Authority on the river, and they have upwards to 95 residents, and they're gathering information now. And late next week, we will be moving in there and doing an on-site vaccination process, and that's just the start. We have identified another 8 to 10 facilities that we'll be helping with. And if we can do more, we will do more. We found out today that we may be able to seek vaccination approval directly with the state, not even go through the public health. So we may be able to do more and more and more. And that's our goal is to reach as many people as we can, as quickly as we can. And the resource we have is simply able to do the vaccinations. Our people have been helping the fixed site now for going on a month and augmenting, if you will, the National Guard. So that process we're excited about, and we'll be moving forward. Where did I leave off here? We had a couple of town employees since we met last that did test positive, and they are recovering. James did some oh my God, James, help me out. Contact tracing. I'm sorry. The whole word just left me there for a moment. We did some contact tracing, see who was involved. A few members were quarantined, and we were concerned that we had 2 back-to-back snowstorms coming. So I know I see both Jay and Jen here, and perhaps they can share things that they've done. But we worked hard with them to determine and come up with a plan that would allow for essential services to continue at the safest for not only the town, but the employees, should the need arise to still be able to plow and work singularly in an asset like a plow truck or pickup or work alone. And fortunately, both snowstorms kind of fizzled a little bit. They weren't as large as predicted, but we look forward to all of the return of all the employees that have tested positive in the speedy recovery. I'll stay on if anybody has any questions, but that's my quick report tonight. I'll turn it to James.
Chief, thank you. Any questions from the board for Chief Wilkin? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Hi, James.
Good evening again. Just to piggyback off what the chief said, again, we're turning in the right direction. The state has low hospitalization numbers, around the same as early November, which is a good sign. It sounds like the darkest days are behind us at this point, so hopefully we can continue to go that direction. As far as the mask ordinance, things like that, I'm still getting complaints here and there from individuals, coming mostly from a couple businesses in town, just seeing individuals not wearing masks, but relatively speaking, that number is very low. I think we're probably around the same, if not better than other communities that, see similar complaints like that. And I think we're trending in the right direction and hopefully it continues.
Thank you. Any questions for James? Okay, thank you, James. Either Jen or Jay, I know you're both online. Did you want to quickly jump in about your department?
I apologize in advance. I'm seeming to have a lot of instability tonight, so bear with me. I'll try and watch your faces and make sure you're hearing me okay. We had to quarantine a good percentage of our staff last week. Thank you to James for working with us on how to do that effectively. We did have to develop a quarantine in truck policy so that essentially those employees who were quarantined could still report for duty voluntarily during the storms. We had 2 storms and we had a water main break. It did work, although it was very lean as far as our staffing level. All the quarantined employees have returned today. It was 10 days since the period that they needed to quarantine. We had no new additional COVID positives. And the 2 employees who did originally test COVID positive have been cleared by their medical teams to return to work. And so we'll be fully staffed tomorrow. That's pretty much it in short.
Thank you. What preventative measures, Jen, can we take, if any, to prevent this in the future? I know it was quite a few people in the department together at the same time, perhaps, or were masks an issue, or what? Are there any preventive measures that we can take?
Yes, I think mask wearing is something that we're having to reinforce, and I think everybody's experienced that bit of a complacency over time, and it's very important to continue that effort. Mm-hmm. And we certainly have reiterated the importance of that. And just making sure that we're minimizing the amount of crossover between staff as far as time in the break room, before start of shift or at the end of shift and things like that. During the quarantine, we did have to close the break room and facilities. We had to make that off limits to people that are on quarantine. They technically have to be just quarantined in their truck or at a particular location and not interacting. But now that that's been withdrawn, they can come back to our break room, but we just need to make sure it's a quick passing through and it's not staying there for any extended period of time.
Okay, because the Public Works Department obviously provides, an incredibly essential function to, our town. We have to, make sure that we have the crews that we need. So I appreciate you reinforcing the masks. Any questions for Director Perry? Okay. With that, we'll move to our next discussion item. And Jen, I see you've got the next 4 or 5, so I'll turn it back to you on the solar array at the Public Works. I think with you, you've got Sarah Greenshields from Revolution Energy and also Ned Reynolds from Revision Energy.
Yes, thank you. We have both Sarah from Revolution, the company who owns the solar array at Exeter Public Works, and Ned Reynolds from Revision, who did an evaluation of the current configuration. And unfortunately, Dave Sharples couldn't be here. Dave's been helping significantly with getting this work done as far as trying to take this offer seriously, to do our diligence, working with Revision to make sure that the offer was appropriate. And I want to thank both Sarah and Ned for being here tonight. And I think you could see in your packet, we did give quite a bit of information. Dave did a thorough job. I don't want to repeat it all by any means, but we're all here to answer any questions that you may have. But Revolution's offer, which was formalized in December of this past year, is offering an early purchase to the town. Our original power purchase agreement did have a buyout by the town from Revolution. I believe it was $75,000 in 2022. And Revolution has offered us this array at $65,000 right now at year 8, which is a significant savings. And it also allows us to not have to be paying for our power from Revolution for the next 3 years. And we do see it as long as there were a couple of, there was one module that was broken and I believe 2 strings that were out just because of power connectors. And Revolution has agreed that those can be addressed and that this would be a significant savings to the town over the course of the life of those panels, which is estimated to be 40 years.
Are there any questions for Director Perry or for Sarah or Ned? Jen, I have one. In the packet, obviously this wasn't budgeted. You and Dave were proposing utilizing appropriations from sewer reserves. Would that be taking away from anything else, or were the reserves established for a project such as this?
So the reserves, I would say the vast majority of the reserves right now are savings in advance of payments for the new wastewater treatment plant. So they are fairly hefty at this point in time. However, the town has used reserves in the past for things that were needed in either the water or the wastewater side of our operations. I mean, that's what they are, enterprise funds that are dedicated just for those purposes. So we feel that this is a fairly minor, the $65,000 purchase price is a fairly minor amount, and it should not have a significant effect on our reserve status or any of our future payments. And again, because it results in savings to the sewer fund in the long run, the sooner we do it, the better. The more savings that we see. And again, because this is powering the wastewater treatment plant, it should be coming out of anything that has to do with sewer and not general fund taxation and not water fund. Similarly, or in parallel fashion, if the town does sell any of the energy credits, those should go to the sewer fund in the future.
You answered my follow-up. Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our packet, there was also a mention of being forgiven a year or 2 of our annual payments to Revolution. Does that cut down on the actual $65,000?
It does offset that. You're absolutely correct. It's especially with this year, I think it would be a direct link. I don't know if Revolution was prepared to take that 65,000 less the, I think it's 5,500 per year. But in future years, it's absolutely a savings to the town. We would not be paying Revolution the 5,500 or thereabouts every year for the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to chime in, the price that we presented at 65,000 included the payment for this calendar year. So the price wouldn't adjust, but because there was construction on site, and it sort of helped us get to this point as a negotiation, that's where we had come up with that 65,000.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, of course.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion if the board so chooses.
I see a motion here. I move to authorize town manager to expend up to $65,000 out of the appropriations from sewer reserves to purchase the solar array at the Department of Public Works facility, with the condition that all items listed on page 2 of 20 in the revision energy maintenance report dated 1/12/2021 includes the broken module, wire connectors, 2 strings not making power, and locks or tags on the AC meter shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the DPW director and the town manager prior to purchase.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ned.
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, we got the Great Bay total nitrogen general permit, and I believe you have somebody with you to speak to this.
Yes, I do. I would like to also introduce Adam Dumville, who works with McLean Middleton. He's an attorney with McLean Middleton and also a town of Exeter resident. But he's here as our attorney on environmental issues. And I don't want to go into super great detail. This is a fairly complicated, long-standing permit. I want to try and keep it as brief as possible, but feel free to ask any questions along the way. As you may or may not recall, about a year ago, I presented to the board on the draft general permit. And at that point in time, the draft permit was fairly challenging for the town to sign on to. It had very low nitrogen water quality goals that would have been extreme for the town to achieve. And the town of Exeter, along with the 12 other communities that have wastewater treatment facilities that discharge ultimately to the waters of the Great Bay, all spoke and wrote comments to EPA during the public comment period that I think were very important for EPA to receive. They did listen. They did make some very significant modifications in the final permit. And the final permit was issued in November of 2021. And we have been poring over the final permit for the last month and a half. There's quite extensive documentation. If anyone clicked on the link in the packet, you were directed to an EPA page that has hundreds of pages of information. That's way too much for anybody to digest in a weekend. But ultimately, what EPA is offering the communities in the Great Bay watershed is an opt-in to this permit, which takes an adaptive management approach to improving our discharges as far as total nitrogen go through the wastewater treatment plant and through our non-point sources of stormwater and overland runoff. So the permit became effective February 1st, and the town, if we choose to opt in, needs to opt in before April 1st. That is the deadline to opt into this Great Bay Total Nitrogen General Permit. From a very high level, again, not getting into great details, town staff, our consultants, and our attorney, Adam, all feel that the general permit as it's structured currently is to the town's advantage to sign on to. This will allow us to, or EPA will do away with the administrative order on consent, which we have been operating under for many years now. And it also provides an opportunity for the communities to work together towards improving water quality and improving our discharges to Great Bay. The other piece that is a little bit more complicated, and we don't want to get into too much detail tonight, we just wanted to present to you the concept of an intermunicipal agreement that has been championed by the cities of Rochester, Portsmouth, and Dover that allows for all of these communities, the 12 or 13 communities, to work together towards plans to address water quality monitoring and doing it in a coordinated and collaborative manner. And there's an intermunicipal agreement that has been reviewed by the Attorney General. That's required for any IMA. And I apologize, I'm going right into my acronyms, but it's a little bit easier to say IMA than intermunicipal agreement more than once. Adam has been reviewing it on our behalf and on behalf of the town of Newmarket. We have coordinated with Newmarket because we're in very similar situations, having expended so much money on upgrading our wastewater treatment facilities and being smaller communities. We wanted to make sure that we were being well represented. So I'd rather answer questions, or if you have anything that you feel needs to be added in kind of the broad view, I'd appreciate your input.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I think right now, as Jennifer presented in a very excellent summary, that it is in the town's benefit at this point to highly consider opting into the general permit. I think there are a number of reasons for that, many of which Jennifer has already alluded to. But I think if there are questions, we'd be happy to discuss those, and we can go from there. But I think that was a very good summary, so thank you, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Attorney Dunville. Any questions for either Attorney Dunville or Director Perry? Selectwoman Gilman.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I don't have any questions, but just for the public, the packet of information that the select board gets is really informative. And I have no problem joining an intermunicipal agreement because we all have the same goal. And I think it's a good idea.
I agree. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So Jennifer, are you looking tonight for a motion to opt into the general permit before April 1st?
That would be most welcome. That would be great. I think the other piece that we will require at some point in time, but we weren't asking for it tonight, is the board's approval for the town manager to sign into the intermunicipal agreement. But we weren't.
No, I think she froze. Oh, can you hear me, Jennifer?
I can now, sorry.
Okay, so you left off with, you were going to ask for a motion for the town manager to sign the IMA, and then you dropped off.
We were going to delay that request for tonight. Okay. We wanted to make sure that the board had ample opportunity to review all those documents. And we were looking at this as almost setting the table for a next conversation with the board.
Is there a deadline to signing that?
There is not a specific deadline to sign on to that. However, there is going to be an organizational meeting in April. And we would recommend that if the town wants a seat at the table, we should definitely be there for that organizational meeting.
Okay, all right. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the town of Exeter to opt into the general permit and submit the notice of intent prior to the April 1st, 2021 deadline.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Jennifer, when would you like to bring this back to the select board prior to that April meeting regarding the IMA?
Have you set your calendar for the next two meetings?
The 1st and the 15th. March 1st and March 15th. And then we have to discuss later on the rest of the month.
I believe, March 1st, that's just next week, right?
Next week, right, yeah.
I think March 15th would probably be a better date. Adam, do you have a sense?
I think March 15th would be fine. I think that, Jennifer, I don't know whether we'd want to have a brief non-public session ahead of this meeting. I think that could be useful if there are other questions specifically pertaining to costs and other issues that may arise specifically related to the intermunicipal agreement and the town of Exeter. But I'll leave that to your discretion.
Actually, I think, Adam, you bring up a good point. If it's possible to have an early meeting before your meeting on March 1st, that we can be prepared for it. It wasn't so much that, it is making sure that the board has adequate time to digest and make a decision. We don't want to force this, and I know there's a lot of moving parts. So maybe if there's time in advance of your March 1st meeting for a brief non-public session.
Well, I think Jennifer, if you and Attorney Dunville could be available, I think that would be advantageous. Looking at the next two meetings and what our agendas are looking like, I think that we would be better suited for time to meet prior to the March 1st meeting, and then maybe taking that up in discussion items of that meeting, because I know the 15th, that's starting to pile up.
Okay.
Would you need more than a half hour?
I don't think so. That would be plenty.
Then we can set up the select board meeting on the 1st to commence at 6:30, and then we'll entertain a motion to go into non-public. Is that acceptable to the rest of the board? Okay, great. Terrific. Okay, that's a good plan. Attorney Dunville, thank you very much.
Very much. I appreciate your time.
Nice to see you tonight. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you. Okay. All right, Jennifer, the drought update.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to provide you with a very brief update. Conditions haven't really changed significantly. This region is still considered abnormally dry. We are still behind the 8 ball already for 2021 as far as precipitation, believe it or not, even though we had some great rain the last couple of weeks. None of that really contributes to groundwater recovery. And so that's something that we're watching very closely. And we're recommending that we continue with the restrictions, the level 2 restrictions, which are every other day watering, so that when we do come out of these frozen conditions and we're into spring, at least we're in a reasonable place as far as water usage. And we are also continuing to encourage people to be conservative in water use and make repairs and don't waste water. It's an important resource.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments for Director Perry on her drought update? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Earlier this month, Director Perry was the guest of the Sustainability Committee, and she gave a really good presentation on proposed piloting program, composting pilot program, and also gave an overview of the recycling changes since last year when she updated the board. So presentation was so informative that we asked Director Perry to come back and talk about the composting pilot program first, but then also to review some of the recycling changes that we need to know about. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for everybody's patience. And I apologize again if I'm breaking up at all. We did provide you in your packet tonight a proposal from Mr. Fox Composting to do food scrap composting at just a collection at the transfer station at Crossroad. And they would remove the material to their composting facilities in southern Maine. This is something I believe that even members of this board had been interested in the past. I know that members of the Sustainability Committee have been very interested and other individuals in town. People may already be familiar with Mr. Fox Composting. They do provide a curbside service to subscribers. I know that there are commercial and institutional subscribers in town and even residential subscribers in town. But this would be a free opportunity for people that want to divert food waste out of their solid waste by bringing it to the transfer station. It would be a free service. They do not have to purchase a transfer station permit at this time. As long as we can control access to it, that's important because we need to make sure that it's only food scraps that are getting into those composting bins. There is a tendency for plastics, which seem to get everywhere and are a problem for everyone. The plastic bags, if people use them as liners, can be problematic. And so we want this to be in a location where we can monitor it and provide education to the residents that want to make use of this. The beautiful thing about commercial grade food composting is that they can compost anything off your plate, anything that comes out of your kitchen, including a turkey carcass, including fat, including
We'll give Jen a minute to...
in your compost.
Jen, I'm sorry, you broke up around the turkey carcass and fat.
So, yeah, there's a lot more material that can go into, there's more material that can go into the commercial composting, including dairy, fat, meat, bones. So it's very easy for people to divert quite a bit of material. Typical households, up to 25% of the waste or in your blue bag is compostable. So this is a great opportunity for the town to be encouraging diversion from the landfill where it ultimately winds up. And as we all know, our landfills are timing out in 10 to 15 years, and we've really got to make some headway as far as getting materials that should be repurposed out of there. So this is a great opportunity. Mr. Fox has proposed a charge of $120.77 a month for two 64-gallon bins. They would come weekly to dump those and take them back to Maine for composting. And that's actually cheaper when I did all the math and looked at how that compares to what we're paying for solid waste, it's cheaper. So the more we can get out, the better. We would like to start with 2 bins, and we'd be excited to see that expand to more if it proves to be popular enough. We haven't set a start date for that. We do have to make a minor modification to our transfer station permit to allow this operation, but Jay and I think that should be relatively quick and easy to do. That's pretty much it. There's some great information. I did include Mr. Fox's flyer and a flyer that we've been working with them on as far as an informational brochure that we would like to get out to the residents as soon as possible.
Great. I know we have in our public, we have the chair of the Sustainability Committee, but before, Chetna, I want to just have the select board have an opportunity to ask questions. Selectwoman Gilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. One is this going to affect, you just said that it will be less expensive for us to go with the composting as opposed to all of that stuff going into solid waste. But will it affect does our contract through waste management go with the amount of the weight of the solid waste that we provide?
It does. We do pay by the ton for solid waste disposal. And we did make sure from Waste Management that they wouldn't see this as us removing something that is of value to them, and they do not. So this is not in any way a breach of contract.
Oh, that's good. And the other question I had was either Waste Management or Mr. Fox had a picture on one of their informational sheets that showed a biodegradable bag that people could use instead of having a bin or a countertop canister to collect their food wastes. Is that going to be available somewhere, or how do we get it?
So yes, using compostable, I'm going to try and here's a very cutting edge distinction between biodegradable and compostable. It's very important that bags are BPI certified and they are compostable. You don't.
It looks like they have them on their website, Julie, just in case Jennifer's having issues.
Right. I just wanted to put it out loud for the general public.
Yeah, I think it's on their main page.
BPI liners online through different online purchasing. I'm not going to use names.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Okay. In our attendees, we have the chair of the Sustainability Committee, Chetna Palmer. Chetna, good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in. So I just wanted to read out a statement from the system of Jennifer Perry and what DPW are looking to do with the program of composting at the transfer station. And I will send this along so that it can be. So I'll just go ahead and read the statement. To the Select Board of Exeter, on Tuesday, the 2nd of February 2021, at our monthly Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting, we had Jennifer Perry come and present and talk about recycling in Exeter. With the need to reduce the amount of landfill waste, the team has been looking at options. So making composting available to Exeter residents would certainly assist in this. As Jennifer said, according to the EPA, 30% of our waste that is landfill can be composted. So by removing organics from the landfill would also reduce the greenhouse gases as well as the waste tonnage fees. Making composting available will allow Exeter residents to reduce the amount of solid waste that is landfilled and thus allow extending the life of the blue bags before being landfilled. So residents would not be using as many blue bags as they would be currently doing so. Offering a single place for compostable materials to be discarded will allow the transfer station to monitor the uptake of the service, as well as ensure residents are aware of what types of waste can be placed in the compost bin, avoiding the contamination, which is the key issue and to the success of the program. So I contacted some of our neighbouring towns. So our neighbouring towns, Newmarket, Dover and Durham, are already offering composting through Mr. Fox, and they have all reported great success. Newmarket said that the program has been hugely successful, and that on average they have composted over 38 tonnes a year so far, and they're adding a third composting bin as the number of residents using the service is increasing daily. So after a period of time, it would be beneficial to consider another location of a compost bin to allow easy access to residents in different parts of the town if the trial that is being proposed is successful. In terms, it's a win-win situation for the town of Exeter, and it's definitely a step to sustainability and allows individuals to play their part in reducing our waste that ends up in landfill. So as the chair of the System Advisory Committee, as well as the committee members, we totally support the programme, and we would support DPW, and we'll work with them to ensure the programme and service is offered and is a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetna. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Cowan.
I have a question, and it might be appropriate for Jennifer or maybe Chetna, but how do the other towns that you surveyed collect their compost? Do the people have to bring it to the transfer station? Yes, you're nodding yes. Okay.
Yes, it's essentially the same program that we're considering. I think in the memo I mentioned 9 or 10 other communities that are doing this. Some are relatively new, like Greenland and Dover, and Newmarket, I believe, was a year or two ago. Durham's been doing it for quite some time, and Portsmouth, but they are collecting it at a centralized location, like a transfer station. It's not the curbside collection. We're just not at this point ready to go that far.
Got it. Thank you. I always have grand plans every spring to make a compost pile that I turn into compost, and it never happens. So this is a great opportunity.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yes, this might be a question actually for the next topic, but we put out trash and recycle bins out on the street for people that are, walking by or eating, enjoying something. How successful has that been with separating out landfill items from, recyclable or compostable items?
I'm sorry.
When I see it, it's just all trash.
Julie, you broke up, but I think your question was how successful would it be if we put out compostable buckets collection in town? Is that your question?
No, it's how successful has been the separation of our trash versus recyclable barrels that are out on the street.
So it is a challenge to keep contamination out of recycling bins, and that is the next part of the presentation, was to talk a little bit more about that. It is a challenge, there's no doubt. A lot of people don't understand and put more than they should in the recycle bin, and recycling really needs to get back to the basics to be done correctly. You should be recycling plastic bottles, metal cans, paper, corrugated cardboard, and that can all go in the single stream one bin. but you shouldn't be putting in any plastic bags. You shouldn't be putting in any anything that can get wound up in the mechanical systems at the recycling facility. So, no plastic hoses, no coat hangers, things of that nature. People think that that's recyclable, and it isn't. We do have receptacles at the transfer station for metals. If you have a closet full of metal coat hangers that you want to get rid of, you can bring them to the transfer station, but they don't go in the recycle bins.
Okay, sorry, I took you off topic. I'd like to go back to one other question. In some towns, and maybe Durham does this, there are composting, basically barrels or compactors that would set out on the sidewalk like our trash bins and recycle bins. Is that something we might look at? Are those successful, for one thing, as far as keeping contaminants out? And would we be looking at doing that after we see how successful the transfer station is?
That's a good question, and I don't really have an answer yet for you. I think this is, as Jay and I like to call it, this is a pilot program for us at the transfer station. At this point in time, people can do that pay for it individually. We aren't looking at going to do it at this point townwide.
Did that answer your question, Selectwoman Gilman? Okay. Chetna, did you have another comment? I see your hand up.
Just wanted to add to the question that Molly had in terms of the towns, that as Jen said, that they do use the transfer station, and they all, having spoken to some of them, they've all said that it allows them to monitor what's going into the compost bins, but they're getting more and more people coming along to use the service, and I probably just like to reiterate to Jan that the committee is more than willing to help with any outreach that needs to be done in terms of getting word out as to what is available, what people can compost and cannot compost.
We appreciate that, because this is going to be a big educational opportunity, and we definitely want to do it right. And Mr. Fox wants us to do it right too. While we're talking about contaminants, like I said, plastic bags are probably the biggest thing, because people want to line their containers so that they're not dirty and stinky. But they really need to be compostable bags that are used. You can use a brown paper bag and line it with that you wouldn't want to put anything too liquidy in that. So it's a little bit of a learning curve, but I know we can do it. Exeter's always been a great community for wanting to do recycling and do it right. So composting, similar thing. Take those produce stickers off, though. Those are pesky little contaminant that drives everybody crazy.
Thanks again, Jen. So, Jen, how will we be paying the annual fee of $1,400 and change to Mr. Fox? Is that coming out of the solid waste budget?
Yes.
Okay. And presumably we could maybe see some savings down the road?
We compost, the more we divert, we do see it as a savings. So, it has a real potential. We'll be watching it closely. They don't measure tonnage, so Jay and I are going to have to be estimating the tonnage on a weekly basis that's being hauled away. That'll be one of our jobs to do, to make sure that we can keep tabs on it.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf?
Yeah, just real quick question. Have you spoken with Adam Webster from Compost Biotics at all? Because I know they had reached out to me and were working with Phillips Exeter Academy with a new composting, basically similar to Mr. Fox, but I don't know if there was any competition, comparative conversations that happened before we decided to go with Mr. Fox?
No, actually, I have to say that we did not have any other conversations. We knew that Mr. Fox was doing it in a lot of these other municipalities. If the board wants us to, we can reach out.
No, I was just I'm inquiring rather, I'm not forcing, but just curious if that had been part of the discussion at all.
Selectman Brown?
Jeff, you mentioned, Jen, that Mr. Fox does not weigh, that it's on us to weigh. So how do we handle audit disputes?
So I couldn't quite understand the last couple words, but
Who weighs the compostables?
so we're going to have to do our best to estimate it. We don't have a scale at the transfer station, but we're going to look at how full is the container. We have a rule of thumb that is used in the waste hauling industry, and I want to say it's, Jay, you may remember what it was, but I wrote it down, and of course I won't be able to find it right now, but if the bins are full, they're going to weigh, and it's all compost, it's not paper products, which tend to be lighter. I want to say it's about 600 pounds. Yeah. So, it's more going to be a visual estimate of how full they are before they get tipped, and what's the material. Is it predominantly compost material, or is it predominantly food scrap material, or is it, say, somebody brought an entire load of soiled pizza boxes, which are going to weigh much less than food scraps. So it's just going to be our best estimate visually.
And they're charging us by the count of bins?
Yes, they did provide 2 or 3 different options. If we went with more bins than 2, I think if it were 3 bins, it would be $170 per month. 4 bins would be $220 a month.
Okay, thanks.
And then Jen, before we move on, Chetna, did you have another comment, or was your hand still up from the last one?
I just had, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I just had a comment with regards to Lovey's question about the other business that PA uses. I think that there was a conversation, from what I recall, when we had a meeting with the economic development manager and I think Rustine as well, and Jen from Laney Lou, and as well as Mr. Fox. We had a conversation at the town hall at the time, and it was mentioned, but there was I think the waste that the company that PA uses, it goes further afield to where Mr. Fox would be taking the composting. So that, I think there was some conversation had at that time, some time ago. I think it was last year or year before.
Thanks, Chetna.
Great, thank you, Chetna. Any other questions on composting before we pivot to recycling? Great, all yours, Jen.
Thank you again for the board's time. Really, the only update that I wanted to make that's a major announcement since last year, when I was last in front of you, was that with recycling, obviously we have to be careful about what goes in the bins to minimize contamination. And at that time, we were telling people, because at that time Waste Management was not accepting the plastic, what we call clamshell containers that are used for berries and produce and bakery goods, things of that nature. And since that time, they have started to allow that in the recycling bins, which is great news because I know a lot of people were shocked when we told them they couldn't. So unfortunately, I'm having to tell you a different message this time, but I think it's a good message because it is an easily, it takes up a lot of space and you hate to put that in your blue bag. But again, it's only plastic numbers 1, 2, and 5 that are recyclable in the waste management program. So plastic bottles.
You with us, Jen?
I am, sorry.
Okay. Plastic bottles and what else? You cut off after plastic bottles.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's
okay.
Bad connection. I think it might be the storm up here. Yeah, plastic bottles.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Was it last year or the year before at one of the elections, Public Works had a really nice display outside the Talbot Gym. I know now with COVID that probably wouldn't be possible, but moving forward, maybe at one of our next elections, that had a big impact with folks and people were talking about that. And maybe even working with the communications committee and also the sustainability committee about, getting the word out on any, updates on recycling items would be great moving forward.
I know, sorry, I'm going to hop in really quickly, Nico. Some towns, or at least when I lived in Boston, they would have the sticker that would go on your recycling bin to clearly state which items were recyclable and which were not. And I don't know if that's something that we've done in Exeter, but that's a really simple, if we could produce those, do mailers out to them or hand them out in some kind of capacity, and people could put them on their blue trash bin, the recyclable trash bins, where it shows, literally cans this, so that people aren't putting, because I know it's a lot of work for the waste management company to have to pull out items that are not recyclable, and then they get left on the street and, sometimes never picked up by the individuals themselves. So I don't know if we've done that, but maybe something as simple as that could be a start.
That's a great suggestion, and it's very similar to what the Sustainability Committee had suggested, and we're working on that right now. We have a fairly complicated one from Waste Management, but I think it needs to be simplified and to make it effective, and something that is fairly waterproof and durable and could be adhered to, like you said, to the compost bin. The recycle bin.
Yeah, I would check out any major city, New York, Boston, anywhere within our region, because I know they have them on all of theirs. And so, stealing is caring in that sense. So let's save ourselves extra work.
I also think that we should be presenting this to school children, because if there's anybody who is diligent about telling their parents what to do, it would be my 7-year-old who would love to police my recycling. And it might be a really good way to do something fun with the kids.
Thank you. That's great.
Well, Selectwoman Cowan, that's a great point. And actually, Mr. Fox came in, I'm losing track of time. It was probably the fall of 2019. It was before COVID. And there were some representatives from parent volunteers from SAU 16 that were helping Main Street School and also Lincoln Street School start composting. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, it'd be a great idea in the springtime for the kids to come before the select board and tell us how their composting project was. And then, of course, COVID hit. So I think you're spot on. The kids are the ones that picked this up. And I think that's a good idea. Any other questions for Jennifer? I know we've taken up a lot of your time tonight. Thank you for your presentations. I see Jay took himself off the video. He can't run away.
I'm still on.
But it's okay. I want to acknowledge the DPW and particularly Jay and his staff for the quick response to emails from citizens about the waste management. Sometimes, we've had weeks where trash gets left in the street, bottles get broken, and I've had a number of citizens come to me in the last year praising Jay and his staff. So Jay, while you're out here, I just want to thank you and acknowledge the work that you and your staff are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you both for your time tonight. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, our last discussion item, we'll bring Mr. Murray back in from the Health Department, and this is regarding an inquiry he received recently about the requirements to open a tattoo establishment in the town of Exeter. And during doing some research with Melissa Roy over the last week, with the help of Pam McElroy and Andy Kohler down in the town clerk's office, we found that there was a warrant article back in 1998, Article 38, which dealt with tattoo establishments, among other things. And then also there was a ordinance passed by the Select Board in 2012 prohibiting tattooing in the town of Exeter, although we can't find a signed copy of the ordinance. So I know Selectwoman Gilman, you actually served on the board then. Can you fill us in a little bit about this?
8 years ago?
Yeah. 9.
I don't remember about the actual signing of the ordinance, but usually it's the 3 readings, and then I think it's just adopted. I don't think we sign anything.
And essentially, it was adopting what had already passed in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that it's come up this evening is, again, James had an inquiry from an individual looking for the requirements. We have a memo in our packet that we've read that James weighed in on how he felt from a health standpoint. And I guess, James, I'll turn it over to you as to what you'd like the board to consider this evening.
Sure. So thank you again for having me back again. As you can see in the memo, I did receive an inquiry last week from February 16th from an individual who is interested in opening a tattoo establishment in Exeter. I've gotten, I want to say, maybe 2 similar inquiries in the past, but the difference with this one was the individual asked what would it look like to have this rule looked at, by the select board or by the town. So with that, I want to bring this inquiry to your attention. Just going back to the memo, I mean, I looked over what other self-inspecting towns and cities do in New Hampshire. It looks like our ordinance was based on a state RSA from 1994 that only allows a licensed physician to practice tattooing or body art in general. Manchester had adopted the same type of ordinance until I think the early 2000s. They changed theirs. Salem as well was one of the first ones to change it to allow tattooing in town and to allow their health officer to actually inspect and license the facilities. The state does license the individual artists. They don't inspect the facilities. I know of a couple towns, Concord and Salem specifically, that do perform inspections. Sorry. I guess I just want to bring this to your attention and see how the board feels about it. I know as times change, we saw a lot of other communities in New Hampshire start to allow this. From a public health perspective in 1998, I think there was a lot of concern, but looking at it now and even the CDC, there isn't as much of a public health concern. Certainly private health concerns as far as bloodborne pathogens and sanitary practices, but as far as how it affects the public health of a community, in my opinion, the the presence of a body art establishment does not affect the public health of the community. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention to get the board's feel.
Well, let's bring it to the board. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to jump in and say this sounds somewhat archaic, and we just need to update it. And, I think it's time.
Would that, oh, sorry, I don't want to jump in, but would that require a vote since we had a vote of the town to ban it?
I think at the very least it would require 3 public readings, but Selectwoman Gilman? You're muted, Selectwoman Gilman.
I would agree with Selectwoman Cowan. This was enacted really by the legislative body, the voters, and the role that the select board had was just to formalize it, putting it in the actual book of ordinances. So I would agree that since it was a legislative move, then it would be a legislative repeal to change it. The only other thing I wanted to say was at this time during the whole COVID thing, I was looking up, what the vaccine order of things has only gone by the schedule that the governor's office has put out. And so I was looking for what kind of services this would fall under as far as going forward. Just because if somebody wants to open something right now, this may not be a good time. And I I found a site called the Body Art Education Alliance, and their first line is, please stop. So that I aside from the decision of whether to change our regulation or our ordinance, this is what I'm reading. So we have time to decide if we want to do this, and we can't put it up for a vote until next year.
Yep. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Yeah, I would leave the decision of a business owner to decide when or how they're going to open, but I do think that this should be something that we should check off of our list of, legislation that we can say is now no longer restricted within our town. But the only question is, would this then, James, would this fall under your direction? Like, would you be the contact person for shops like this opening up to make sure that they're following regulations, or what would that look like?
So I guess that would be up to the select board if you want to have a vote by the public to decide on the fate of this ordinance. And if the select board wanted me to draft up an ordinance, we are a self-inspecting town, so with that we have a few advantages. I know as far as other self-inspecting towns, like I said, Salem and Concord do perform inspections. I'd be happy to follow up with those health officers and see what their ordinances look like more specifically in their inspection processes. If it is something that the select board wants to take up and wants to look further into, I'm happy to draft up an ordinance that would include inspection services with that. It would take me some time to look into the state RSAs as well to see what I would need to hit in terms of falling in alignment with RSA. I believe it's 314A, but I guess at the end of the day that it's up to the select board as to whether we want to inspect and license facilities, if we want to leave it to the state to just license the individuals.
For me personally, I think that whatever the standards that we follow suit for restaurants in our town, I would hope we do similar things for something like a tattoo piercing shop. So, if preliminarily you could start to collect data on that stuff from neighboring towns that do have those regulations, I think that would be helpful. And I don't know specifically when we would actually vote on this, but if we do, I think the more information we have up front, the faster we can go along with it.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Chair, currently 314A references all of the emergency orders that the governor has established, which go way back and then have been amended. I'm just saying this because it's a fact. the body art establishments aren't on any list that I've seen as an essential service, which is what has been opened earlier. But I'll go back and say we can't, as a body of a governing body of the select board, go back and change what the legislative body had decided for banning basically body art. So James does have time because we won't be able to bring it up until next March.
Yep. Any other questions or comments?
I mean, I think that this is something that we can work on. I agree. I don't think that we have the power to overturn a legislative act, even if it was in a different time and era. And so, I mean, I think that is my sentiment. I don't know, James, if you need a vote or a motion from us, but
we have an ordinance in place now, so the ordinance stands until it goes back before the legislative body.
Right. Which is, at this point, it's not until next March.
Right, 2022.
Right. And it might be worthwhile taking a peek at other things that we have on our books that don't make sense to have.
That has been a goal for a while. And in fact, this went into our ordinances a couple of years after the vote because we hadn't cleaned up our ordinance book. So this is an example of why we should kind of do this annually, but that's a subject for a goal setting situation.
That can be one of our goals for this year. Any other questions or comments? Great. James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to regular business. Get here in our packet. Selectwoman Gilman, we have several veterans credits, elderly exemptions, and solar exemptions. You're muted. Page 110.
Yeah, I know. I'm using the instructions for unmuting and it's not working tonight. So please forgive me, but okay. I'll get there in just 2 pages away. All right. For following our veterans credits, and I move to approve a veterans credit for map 27, lot 1, lot 12, unit 4, in the amount of $5,000 for 2 disabled veterans.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown. Selectman Brown. I'm not hearing an answer. Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The chair says aye. The clerk says aye, Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, next I move to approve a veteran's credit for map 68, lot 6, unit 534 for $2,500.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I move to approve an elderly exemption for map 64, lot 105, unit 86, in the amount of $152,251.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, next we have a list of solar locations that don't involve any money. I guess we can approve solar exemptions at map 19, lot 16, unit 10, map 83, lot 86, map 64, lot 72, and map 83, lot 34. And there being no money involved, I don't think we need a vote.
No vote. Okay, thank you. Permits and approvals, we have Mr. Bisson from Parks and Rec. Good evening, Mr. Bisson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. In your packet, you will see a couple of memos. Reason we're pushing these to be approved. Oh, my phone just reset, sorry. The first memo would be for sheds. As you know, with COVID-19 hit, the price of lumber has gone up 112% since last year. So getting these on the books, again, these orders is imperative so the prices do not continue to go up. The first one being Brickyard Park. We have a small metal shed there that was put in the 1980s. The functionality is no longer there. It leaks, the floor is rusted out and become a safety hazard, and it does not fit the amount of equipment we need to run programs there. So I am requesting access to use the Park Improvement Fund to purchase a shed. As you see, we have 3 bids. Those are the current prices. So if we place that order, we actually lock it in, and we are recommending JD Sheds to be awarded the bid for an 8x10 shed to be put at Brickyard Park.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Bisson? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion from the board to allow the Parks and Rec Department to expend $2,400 from the Parks Improvement Fund by contracting with JD's Shed for the purchase of a storage shed for Brickyard Park.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes. All right, Greg.
And the second one, as you can see in your packet, is a little renovation to Gilman Park. The fencing pictured in your packet is in need of replacement, but instead of making a solid guardrail all the way around the green space, we're suggesting supplementing them with some trees, and the tree committee is very excited about that. So we received 3 quotes for the new fencing. Again, the COVID prices escalating, cost in lumber is skyrocketing. So we're recommending to go with AAA fence to rebuild the fence before it becomes too big of a liability for the town. And that's for $12,500. And then as well, we're going to add in there 10 trees, and the tree committee is working with us to pick which species of trees we're going to put in there. They will be local, but as well as planting trees, it's successful to have them watering, as to Jen's point of a drought. We're also requesting money to purchase what we call tree diapers, and tree diapers are explained in your packet. Basically, they use the same material as diapers that retain water even when it's misting or the morning dew. So it helps keep the trees watered without having to physically go out there and water them ourselves.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, it just came to me, are any of the, I know Brentwood Fence is local, but are the other 2 companies local?
AAA Fence is out of Dover, and the 125 is out of Barrington.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Bisson? So we have 3 potential motions here. The first, I would entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $12,500 out of the Parks Improvement Fund to contract AAA Fencing, Inc. from Dover, New Hampshire to replace the Gilman Park fencing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. I would entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $3,500 out of the Parks Improvement Fund to contract with Stratum Circle Nursery to purchase 10 trees for Gilman Park.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And last, I'd entertain a motion to allow the Parks and Recreation Department to expend $755.88 out of the Parks Improvement Fund to contract with Zynovation Inc. to purchase 12 tree diapers for Gilman Park.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Bisson, don't run away. In our correspondence, we have, let me find it here. I think we have a piece of correspondence on which we must take action. Greg, can you speak to that briefly?
Yes. Last fall, Mr. Chair, the Exeter Women's Club approached me about donating a little free library for the recreation park. They were looking for some kind of outreach that they could do and maintain. I told them to write up a proposal for me, and they got it to me a couple of weeks ago with a picture of an already pre-built. So they're anticipating you guys accepting this donation. They will install it and maintain it and have COVID protocols where they will sanitize any books that will go in and put them aside. I think it will be a nice little asset and supplement our summer reading program that we have done in the past with the library.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions. I'm looking at the photograph. It's sitting on a chair, so I was just wondering what kind of mounting it would have at the park and where at the park we might put it.
We are actually going to discuss that and probably put it near the entrance of near the tennis courts. The reason we're doing it, we don't want to put it in front of Planet Playground because, as we know, that's not our property. So we want it where it's near the playground, where it's visible, and it would be just a 4x4 post that would go in the ground and it'd be mounted on. So it's very minimal.
And how big is it?
It's not very big. It's
the ones I've seen on Epping Road are quite tiny, so I was just wondering about.
Yeah, it's about the same size, Julie. She didn't go into specifics, but I wouldn't fathom it's much bigger than the one on Epping Road.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the donation of the little library to be housed at the Recreation Park on Hampton Road, donation made by the Exeter Area General Federation of Women's Club.
So moved with great thanks.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
And clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. The motion passes unanimously and with many thanks for the donation. Okay, Mr. Bisson, any other Parks and Rec updates while we have you here?
Sure. We actually have started our lottery for the summer camp and have gone through the entire list. We are waiting to hear back from the last round of calls, which will be tomorrow. They have a deadline to get to us. I can say we have right now 108 registered, so we're very happy with that number. and we'll be formulating a plan to provide registration to the general public, giving residents of Exeter the first opportunity to take any spots with a max of 220.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Mr. Bisson? All right, thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
So, Melissa, you've had a pretty busy 10 days, and I think that this agenda pretty much encompasses everything that you've been working on, but this is the opportunity for the town manager to give a report. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
I had said no, I'm just kidding. So I don't have anything to report this time, but I will put something together for next week.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Select Board Committee reports. Selectman Brown?
Sure. So we had the Police Stakeholders Committee meeting on the 9th, I think it was. The department presented on the mental health program they're doing called One Mind. They're sort of leading the state in that, where their officers are trained in a suicide gauging system. We heard from another member of the health community on that program. And then I think we're meeting again tomorrow. Communications committee is postponed until tomorrow. There was an issue with posting the meeting on time. And then the facilities advisory committee met with just basically housekeeping issues as they're starting their new term now, and talking about the 10 to 15 year scope of building projects, and as well as how they'll relate to the police, the public safety effort. So that's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Select Women Roundtree Olaf.
The housing committee met, I don't know what today is, Monday. We met Friday. Do the math, whatever date that is. So we met and discussed, continue to discuss affordable small housing or affordable housing for residents in Exeter. And we had a couple of companies who are businesses in Exeter. And to put it bluntly, they said that if we as a town cannot work towards coming up with affordable housing for their employees, they may have to relocate elsewhere. So I'm going to put that out there that, yes, we have to work harder at creating affordable housing for folks who want to live here, because the companies that provide, resources to our town may well relocate if we cannot do that in the near future, because many of them are international companies and can afford to do that. So it is really something that we need to start considering and thinking about ways to ameliorate this problem that we do have on hand. Other than that, nothing else to report.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Selectwoman Gilman.
Well, I'm going to follow up on Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf's comments, because there is actually a bill that went through my committee and is going to the floor, I think on Wednesday, that gives tax incentives for building affordable housing. And it's not limited to, like we have downtown, where you can get incentives for redeveloping or renewing an establishment through renovation, and you get extra years if you add affordable housing. And we've had that be successful for the business, but not for the affordable housing aspect. So this bill would just cover tax incentives like the 79E that we already use to build affordable housing. And that's affordable housing is defined in the state statutes based on income levels. For the town, we had an HDC meeting. There wasn't much there. The Heritage Commission is holding on the 24th virtual meeting for explanation of the Park Street area. Park Street Heritage Area. There you go. Which is just an establishment of an area of a neighborhood that would celebrate and protect its neighborhood feel. Now I want to give you a few house things that probably you think I'll take too long, but here it is. there are a couple of bills that are really dangerous. One of them is House Bill 459, which is causes a lot of liability for select boards. Put some penalties depending on the actions that we take, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, but large personal liabilities. There is CACR 9, which is a constitutional amendment concurrent resolution. These are things that have to be voted on or approved by 2/3 of the voting body across the state, not just the town or the House and Senate, but across the state. It's a 2% tax cap, which would not affect it might affect, but it's not meant to affect your actual tax rate. It's meant to affect your actual tax bill. So our revenue would be fixed at 2% above what your last tax bill was. So it doesn't take into account cost of living, doesn't take into account union negotiations, anything that would cause us more expense. So it's very troubling, and I just have a lot of trouble with it. The crazy one that I don't know why it went forward is permitting lemonade stands. The state statutes right now give the towns the authority to license vendors and street hawkers, etc. And for some reason, somebody's stuck on lemonade stands for people who are under 17 years old. And it went through my committee. There's no examples of there being a problem in New Hampshire, but there was one in Texas 10 years ago. So
there's been a lot of problems in a lot of states and cities with things like that.
Well, the sponsors didn't know anything about other than Texas 10 years ago, so they didn't make a good argument, but it's making it to the floor this week. Another one has to do with budgeting at some towns. I have to tell you people that I am impressed with how well our administration runs our town, including this board, but also our town manager and the other department heads. I've lost it. There's a bill to prohibit towns from having budgets with line items that have a zero in them, which I understood, because if it's got a zero, then there's no purpose to that line item, which is why we put $1 in them. Because towns are allowed to adjust line items based on the needs. Like, who expected that we'd have to buy so much hand sanitizer and masks at this time? So that money had to be moved from, the health inspector's budget or somewhere. And this bill would prohibit that for if you put in $0. And I don't know why any town does $0. It just gives the line no purpose, and it gives the line no purpose. So how can you put money in there? But that's another one that has a strong liability to the boards of selectmen, another huge personal liability of $100,000 if we knowingly do this. And it surprisingly passed out of my committee, even though several of us are select board members.
Wow.
So,
Selectwoman Olaf has a question for you.
Sure.
No, I just wanted to jump in to add a little information to the lemonade stand question that you had. There have been a lot of cases over the last 3 or 4 years where young children, BIPOC children, have been singled out for having lemonade stands in different cities, including Texas, Ohio, Chicago, and I think Atlanta as well, where police were called on children under the age of 15 for selling lemonade in front of their houses. So that's the history behind that. And I think it may not seem like an issue in New Hampshire, but whoever brought it up clearly is doing so in a preventative measure to combat what's going on in the country right now. So I see the purpose behind it.
I see the purpose behind it too, but it just the sponsors did not have the information that you have, so it didn't. It really didn't make the grade as far as my committee was concerned. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Thank you, Selectwoman Cowan.
The only thing that I'll add to Selectman Brown's recap of the police committee meeting 2 weeks ago now was that we are Exeter is the first police department to be certified in the One Mind communication and risk assessment, which is a really great thing. There is a lot of interest in a regional capacity, which is exciting to explore. We had a planning board meeting on last Thursday where we talked about the yield plan for the Brian Grisette property. I would encourage everybody to check that out if one of the worries that you have is affordable housing in town. One point of personal privilege that I will take right now is to ask Melissa to make sure that we have information on the town website about absentee ballots. I've been getting a couple of people who are wondering about when they can start to fill out their ballots and when they can request them. And the reason for using an absentee ballot for COVID still stands, so you will be allowed to vote absentee if you would like. And then the town election is March 9th.
Thank you.
I will make sure to get that information and make sure it's updated.
Awesome, thank you.
So, and also the board, I heard from moderator Scafidi today, he is going to be doing another PSA on Channel 22, working with Bob, and scheduled a meeting to meet with Melissa and me next week to go over the election, and he will be invited to our select board meeting Monday night for any updates. So I did not have any committee meetings last week. Sustainability meets next week. So we can move on to correspondence. The first piece of correspondence was from Senator Gannon. I don't know, Julie, if you wanted to speak to this briefly. This was about the audit of the Wyndham election.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. The Wyndham election, there were 5 candidates for the 4 representatives that represent that town, amongst others. And the one candidate at the end came in just 24 votes behind the next one up and asked for a recount. And then the recount came in and it was extraordinarily different. And there was a difference of 300 votes amongst the top 4, I think. So there's been a big push from the Wyndham residents to have a recount. And so this bill is about having the recount, but it's really about testing the machines. It's not going to change the outcome of the vote. It's just to make sure the machines are accurate. But there is a separate part of it that's asking for a hand recount of the ballots just to make sure they're the same as what comes out of the machines.
Great, thank you. And we also have correspondence from Xfinity on some programming advisory. We have correspondence from a gentleman, Matt Goodwin, from Modern Concepts. He is a website developer, and I had an opportunity to read the letter over the weekend, but I'd like to sit down with IT and maybe Darren Wyndham, the economic developer, to kind of go into this a little bit further. Maybe we can bring this back to the board for discussion. And lastly, a letter of thank you for the gift to the Exeter Historical Society. Okay, reviewing the board calendar, we are scheduled for next Monday. And again, we agreed to change that date due to the election being on the 9th. We didn't want to have a meeting on the 8th. So looking at the rest of March, the only meeting scheduled is March 22nd, where we're meeting on the 1st. I would propose that we reschedule to March 15th and March 29th. So our meetings in March would be March 1st, March 15th, and March 29th. And I'd ask for approval from the board to schedule those dates, or if there's any objection. Okay. Melissa, can you and Pam update the calendar this week with those dates? And again, it's the 1st, the 15th, and the 29th.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay. Any other discussion before we get to our last item? That's not on the agenda. Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to enter into non-public session for the 5 select board members.
Mr. Chair, I will move that we enter into non-public session under RSA 91-A :3, Roman numeral 2A.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second, Madam Clerk.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye, and procedurally, we're going to jump to the other link that I sent, and hopefully I had better luck this week than I did last week. And then we'll come back to this link to move to adjourn the meeting. Okay.
12 months.
About the town's time.
Okay. We all here?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I would now look for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Be well.
Traffic, emergency, and more. Customize if you want to be notified by text, email, and/or voice message. Or download the app Smart 911. You can also download the My Exeter app to report various issues from potholes to issues with the town website.